The World Order of Bahá'u'lláh by Shoghi Effendi. Copyright 1938-1955 by the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. The World Order of Bahá'u'lláh was first published in 1938, a second printing being issued in 1944. This 1965 impression is the second printing of the 1955 revised edition with a new preface, printed in the United States of America. Your reader is Bill Curie, and I am reading this in the name of Ella Heimbrot. Introduction by Horace Holley. The general communications written to the American Baha'i community by the Guardian of the Faith between 1922 and 1929 explained and encouraged the development of the administrative institutions created by Bahá'u'lláh and promulgated by Abdu'l-Baha in his Will and Testament. These letters have been published in a volume entitled Baha'i Administration, the source of information on the institutions of local and national spiritual assemblies, the annual convention, and the nature of those relationships organically uniting Baha'is in their collective worship and activity. The letters, now collected and published under the title of The World Order of Bahá'u'lláh, have a different aim and a far greater scope. These later communications unfold a clear vision of the relation between the Baha'i community and the entire process of social evolution under the dispensation of Bahá'u'lláh. The vital distinction between the Baha'i community and the sects and congregations of former religions had already been made apparent, but the present volume establishes the Baha'i administrative order as the nucleus and pattern of the world civilization emerging under divine inspiration at this focal point of human history. While, therefore, it represents a continuance of the Guardian's special task of teaching and guiding the Baha'is throughout the development of a rapidly maturing faith, the volume discloses the full degree to which Baha'u'llah's message applies to the world of humanity, and not merely to those who are believers at this time. The titles and subtitles were not a part of the original text, but have been added with Shoghi Effendi's approval for the convenience of the reader. In The World Order of Bahá'u'lláh, we are enabled to perceive the significance of the new dimension which Baha'u'lláh gave to religion in this era, the supremacy of divine law in civilization, fulfilling that supremacy which in previous dispensations religion had exercised over individual souls. Shoghi Effendi's exposition of the teachings, his unique realization of the ultimate aim and purpose of Baha'u'llah's revelation, are no static commentary upon a sacred text, but the very essence of world statesmanship evoked in the hour of man's direst need. No longer do the Baha'is require Abdu'l-Baha's written testament to prove the existence of the guardianship. The successive communications from Shoghi Effendi, and especially those devoted to the subject of world order, in themselves contain the highest demonstration that Baha'u'llah's spirit continues to bless his cause, and assures victory in the reconciliation of the peoples of earth and their union in one faith and one order. For those who have inclined to believe that even the realization of the mighty dream of the return of Christ would mean nothing more than the vindication of personal spirituality and individual righteousness, the idea of religion giving a law to the nation is the most revolutionary concept which can enter the mind of man. For Baha'u'lláh, we should readily recognize, has not only imbued mankind with a new and regenerating spirit. He has not merely enunciated certain universal principles or propounded a particular philosophy, however potent, sound, and universal these may be. In addition to these, he, as well as Abdu'l-Baha after him, has, unlike the dispensations of the past, clearly and specifically laid down a set of laws, established divine institutions, and provided for the essentials of a divine economy. These are destined to be a pattern for future society, a supreme instrument for the establishment of the most great peace, and the one agency for the unification of the world, and the proclamation of the reign of righteousness and justice upon the earth. Does not the very operation of the world-unifying forces that are at work in this age necessitate that he who is the bearer of the message of God in this day should not only reaffirm that same self-exalted standard of human conduct inculcated by the prophets gone before him, but embody in his appeal to all governments and peoples the essentials of that social code, that divine economy, which must guide humanity's concerted efforts in establishing that all-embracing federation which is to signalize the advent of the kingdom of God on this earth. Such words as these, charged with the potency of a faith that is not merely a written work, but the very dynamic spirit transforming the life of the entire world, make the World Order of Bahá'u'lláh a work of consummate importance to every sincere seeker, and not to Baha'is alone. In the light of the existence of international chaos, they reveal the most significant truth of this era, namely that the old conception of religion, which separated spirituality from the fundamental functions of civilization, compelling men to abide by conflicting principles of faith, of politics, and of economics, has been forever destroyed. The command, "Render unto God that which is of God, and unto Caesar that which is of Caesar," has been annulled by the law of the oneness of humanity revealed by Baha'u'lláh. Leaders of religion, exponents of political theories, governors of human institutions, who, at present, are witnessing with perplexity and dismay the bankruptcy of their ideas and the disintegration of their handiwork, would do well to turn their gaze to the revelation of Baha'u'lláh, and to meditate upon the world order which, lying enshrined in his teachings, is slowly and imperceptibly rising amid the welter and chaos of present-day civilization. The world's equilibrium hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this new world order, Bahá'u'lláh. Preface to 1955 edition by Horace Holley. 17 fateful years have passed since the publication of the first edition of the World Order of Bahá'u'lláh. Neither the disasters of the Second World War nor the increasing menace of the post-war period can challenge Shoghi Effendi's convictions, nor invalidate his thesis, nor deny his ultimate hopes expressed in these letters written between 1929 and 1936. On the contrary, his presentation of the world's mission of the Baha'i faith acquires added force from the very failure of human philosophy and statesmanship to attain security for mankind. The reader had in these pages access to a public document addressed to the people of spiritual faith in all races, all nations, and all creeds. Recognition and acceptance, however, calls for an act of faith, since these basic truths have as yet no endorsement capable of public influence with the massive prejudices which still command the loyalty of partisan minds. The fundamental thesis developed in this work has been carried farther in two later works by the Guardian of the Faith. In a text dated December 25, 1938, Shoghi Effendi unfolded the mighty theme, the advent of divine justice, hailing the ultimate victory of world unity after the peoples had been purged and purified by intense ordeals. Recognizing that the Baha'is have established their administrative order, the Guardian holds aloft the great teaching missions which that order is destined to undertake. The text is immediately identified with the Baha'i community, but that community is associated with a goal representing the best interests of humanity itself. The second work, The Promised Day Has Come, dated March 28, 1941, related the history of the 19th and early 20th centuries to the Bab, Baha'u'lláh, and Abdul-Baha, who exemplified the expression of the divine will. The destiny of an era is determined by its reception of the prophets. When the word of God is denied, resisted, an effort made to destroy its potency, man places himself in opposition to God. From that opposition flow the wars and revolutions which have become the instruments by which a non-believing generation inflicts dire punishment upon itself. The Promised Day Has Come brings the note of dramatic climax to the Guardian's discussion of the faith of Baha'u'lláh and the world in which its high mystery is unveiled. For the reader who seeks understanding of the historic background in which the Baha'i faith arose and fulfilled its destiny and some knowledge of the establishment of Baha'i institutions in East and West, Shoghi Effendi's God Passes By provides the authentic record of events and elucidates their meaning. This work, in fact, stands unique in the annals of religion as a history of the Prophet written soon after his passing by the head of its community, with access to all documents and materials and complete understanding of its nature and purpose. Consideration of the world order of Baha'u'lláh therefore opens the door to the most effective expression of spiritual statesmanship available in the world today. Page 1. The World Order of Baha'u'lláh. To the members of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada. Dearly beloved co-workers, I have been acquainted by the pursual of your latest communication with the nature of doubts that have been publicly expressed by one who was wholly misinformed as to the true precepts of the cause regarding the validity of institutions that stand inextricably interwoven with the faith of Baha'u'lláh. Not that I, for a moment, view such faint misgivings in the light of an open challenge to the structure that embodies the faith, nor is it because I question in the least the unyielding tenacity of the faith of the American believers, if I venture to dwell upon what seems to me appropriate observations at the present stage of evolution of our beloved cause. I am indeed inclined to welcome these expressed apprehensions, inasmuch as they afford me an opportunity to familiarize the elected representatives of the believers with the origin and character of the institutions which stand at the very basis of the world order ushered in by Baha'u'lláh. We should feel truly thankful for such futile attempts to undermine our beloved faith, attempts that protrude their ugly face from time to time, seem for a while able to create a breach in the ranks of the faithful, recede finally into the obscurity of oblivion, and are thought of no more. Such incidents we should regard as the interpositions of Providence, designed to fortify our faith, to clarify our vision, and to deepen our understanding of the essentials of His divine revelation. Sources of the Baha'i World Order. It would, however, be helpful and instructive to bear in mind certain basic principles with reference to the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha, which, together with the Kitab-i-Aqdas, constitutes this chief depository wherein are enshrined those priceless elements of that divine civilization, the establishment of which is the primary mission of the Baha'i faith. A study of the provisions of these sacred documents will reveal the close relationship that exists between them, as well as the identity of purpose and method which they inculcate. Far from regarding their specific provisions as incompatible and contradictory in spirit, every fair-minded inquirer will readily admit that they are not only complementary, but that they mutually confirm one another, and are inseparable parts of one complete unit. A comparison of their contents with the rest of Baha'i sacred writings will similarly establish the conformity of whatever they contained with the spirit as well as the letter of the authenticated writings and sayings of Baha'u'lláh and Abdu'l-Baha. In fact, he who reads the Aqdas with care and diligence will not find it hard to discover that the Most Holy Book itself anticipates in a number of passages the institutions which Abdu'l-Baha ordains in his will. By leaving certain matters unspecified and unregulated in his Book of Laws, Baha'u'lláh seems to have deliberately left a gap in the general scheme of the Baha'i dispensation, which the unequivocal provisions of the Master's will has filled. To attempt to divorce the one from the other, to insinuate that the teachings of Baha'u'lláh have not been upheld in their entirety and with absolute integrity by what Abdu'l-Baha has revealed in his will, is an unpardonable affront to the unswerving fidelity that has characterized the life and labors of our beloved Master. I will not attempt in the least to assert or demonstrate the authenticity of the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha, for that in itself would betray an apprehension on my part as to the unanimous confidence of the believers in the genuineness of the last written wishes of our departed Master. I will only confine my observations to those issues which may assist them to appreciate the essential unity that underlines the spiritual, the humanitarian, and the administrative principles enunciated by the author and the interpreter of the Baha'i faith. I am at a loss to explain that strange mentality that inclines to uphold as the sole criterion of the truth of the Baha'i teachings what is admittedly only an obscure and unauthenticated translation of an oral statement made by Abdu'l-Baha, in defiance and total disregard of the available text of all his universally recognized writings. I duly deplore the unfortunate distortions that have resulted in days past from the incapacity of the interpreter to grasp the meaning of Abdu'l-Baha, and from his incompetence to render adequately such truths as have been revealed to him by the Master's statements. Much of the confusion that has obscured the understanding of the believers should be attributed to this double error involved in the inexact rendering of an only partially understood statement. Not infrequently has the interpreter even failed to convey the exact purport of the inquirer's specific questions, and by his deficiency of understanding and expression in conveying the answer of Abdu'l-Baha, has been responsible for reports wholly at variance with the true spirit and purpose of the cause. It was chiefly in view of the misleading nature of the reports of the informal conversations of Abdu'l-Baha with visiting pilgrims that I have insistently urged the believers of the West to regard such statements as merely personal impressions of the sayings of their master, and to quote and consider as authentic only such translations as are based upon the authenticated text of his recorded utterances in the original tongue. It should be remembered by every follower of the cause that the system of Bahá'í administration is not an innovation imposed arbitrarily upon the Baha'is of the world since the Master's passing, but derives its authority from the will and testament of Abdu'l-Bahá, is specifically prescribed in unnumbered tablets, and rests in some of its essential features upon the explicit provisions of the Kitab-i-Aqdas. It thus unifies and correlates the principles separately laid down by Bahá'u'lláh and Abdu'l-Bahá, and is indissolubly bound with the essential verities of the faith. To disassociate the administrative principles of the cause from the purely spiritual and humanitarian teachings would be tantamount to a mutilation of the body of the cause, a separation that can only result in the disintegration of its component parts and the extinction of the faith itself. Local and national houses of justice. It should be carefully borne in mind that the local as well as the international houses of justice have been expressly enjoined by the Kitab-i-Aqdas, that the institution of the National Spiritual Assembly as an intermediary body, and referred to in the Master's will as the secondary house of justice, has the express sanction of Abdu'l-Bahá, and that the method to be pursued for the election of the international and national houses of justice has been set forth by him in his will, as well as in a number of his tablets. Moreover, the institutions of the local and national funds that are now the necessary adjuncts to all local and national spiritual assemblies have not only been established by Abdu'l-Bahá in the tablets he revealed to the Baha'is of the Orient, but their importance and necessity have been repeatedly emphasized by him in his utterances and writings. The concentration of authority in the hands of the elected representatives of the believers, the necessity of the submission of every adherent of the faith to the considered judgment of Baha'i assemblies, his preference for unanimity in decision, the decisive character of the majority vote, and even the desirability for the exercise of close supervision over all Baha'i publications, have been sedulously instilled by Abdu'l-Bahá as evidenced by his authenticated and widely scattered tablets. To accept his broad and humanitarian teachings on one hand, and to reject and dismiss the neglectful indifference his more challenging and distinguishing precepts would be an act of manifest disloyalty to that which he has cherished most in his life. That the spiritual assemblies of today will be replaced in time by the houses of justice, and are to all intents and purposes identical and not separate bodies, is abundantly confirmed by Abdu'l-Bahá himself. He has, in fact, in a tablet addressed to the members of the First Chicago Spiritual Assembly, the first elected Baha'i body instituted in the United States, referred to them as the members of the House of Justice for that city, and has thus with his own pen established beyond any doubt the identity of the present Baha'i spiritual assemblies with the houses of justice referred to by Bahá'u'lláh. For reasons which are not difficult to discover, it has been found advisable to bestow upon the elected representatives of Baha'i communities throughout the world the temporary appellation of spiritual assemblies, a term which, as the position and aims of the Baha'i faith are better understood and more fully recognized, will gradually be superseded by the permanent and more appropriate designation of House of Justice. Not only will the present-day spiritual assemblies be styled differently in future, but they will be enabled also to add to their present functions those powers, duties, and prerogatives necessitated by the recognition of the faith of Bahá'u'lláh, not merely as one of the recognized religious systems of the world, but as the state religion of an independent and sovereign power. And as the Baha'i faith permeates the masses of the peoples of East and West, and its truth is embraced by the majority of the peoples of a number of the sovereign states of the world, will the Universal House of Justice attain the plenitude of its power, and exercised as the supreme organ of the Baha'i Commonwealth all the rights, the duties, and responsibilities incumbent upon the world's future superstate. It must be pointed out, however, in this connection, that, contrary to what has been confidently asserted, the establishment of the Supreme House of Justice is in no way dependent upon the adoption of the Baha'i faith by the mass of the peoples of the world, nor does it presuppose its acceptance by the majority of the inhabitants of any one country. In fact, Abdu'l-Bahá himself, in one of his earliest tablets, contemplated the possibility of the formation of the Universal House of Justice in his own lifetime, and but for the unfavorable conditions prevailing under the Turkish regime, would have, in all probability, taken the preliminary steps for its establishment. It will be evident, therefore, that given favorable circumstances under which the Baha'is of Persia and of the adjoining countries under Soviet rule may be enabled to elect their national representatives in accordance with the guiding principles laid down in Abdu'l-Baha's writings, the only remaining obstacle in the way of the definite formation of the International House of Justice will have been removed. For upon the national houses of justice of the East and the West devolves the task, in conformity with the explicit provisions of the will, of electing directly the members of the International House of Justice, not until they are themselves fully representative of the rank and file of the believers in their respective countries, not until they have acquired the weight and the experience that will enable them to function vigorously in the organic life of the cause, can they approach their sacred task and provide the spiritual basis for the constitution of so august a body in the Baha'i world. The institution of guardianship. It must be also clearly understood by every believer that the institution of guardianship does not under any circumstances abrogate or even in the slightest degree detract from the powers granted to the Universal House of Justice by Bahá'u'lláh in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, and repeatedly and solemnly confirmed by Abdu'l-Baha in his will. It does not constitute in any manner of contradiction to the will and writings of Bahá'u'lláh, nor does it nullify any of his revealed instructions. It enhances the prestige of that exalted assembly, stabilizes its supreme position, safeguards its unity, assures the continuity of its labors, without presuming in the slightest to infringe upon the inviolability of its clearly defined sphere of jurisdiction. We stand indeed too close to so monumental a document to claim for ourselves a complete understanding of all its implications, or to presume to have grasped the manifold mysteries it undoubtedly contains. Only future generations can comprehend the value and the significance attached to this divine masterpiece, which the hand of the master builder of the world has designed for the unification and the triumph of the worldwide faith of Baha'u'lláh. Only those who come after us will be in a position to realize the value of the surprisingly strong emphasis that has been placed on the institution of the House of Justice and of the guardianship. They only will appreciate the significance of the vigorous language employed by Abdu'l-Baha with reference to the band of covenant breakers that has opposed him in his days. To them alone will be revealed the suitability of the institutions initiated by Abdu'l-Baha to the character of the future society which is to emerge out of the chaos and confusion of the present age. In this connection, I cannot but feel amused at the preposterous and fantastic idea that Muhammad Ali, the prime mover and the focal center of unyielding hostility to the person of Abdu'l-Baha, should have freely associated himself with the members of the family of Abdu'l-Baha in the forging of a will, which, in the words of the writer herself, is but a recital of the plottings in which for 30 years Muhammad Ali had been busily engaged. To such a hopeless victim of confused ideas, I feel I can best reply by a genuine expression of compassion and pity, mingled with my hopes for her deliverance from so profound a delusion. It was in view of the aforesaid observations that I have, after the unfortunate and unavoidable delay occasioned by my ill health and absence from the Holy Land during the Master's passing, hesitated to resort to the indiscriminate circulation of the will, realizing full well that it was primarily directed to the recognized believers, and only indirectly concerned the larger body of the friends and sympathizers of the cause. The animating purpose of Baha'i institutions. And now it behooves us to reflect on the animating purpose and the primary function of these divinely established institutions, the sacred character and the universal efficacy of which can be demonstrated only by the spirit they diffuse and the work they actually achieve. I need not dwell upon what I have already reiterated and emphasized, that the administration of the cause is to be conceived as an instrument and not a substitute for the faith of Baha'u'lláh, that it should be regarded as a channel through which his promised blessings may flow, that it should guard against such rigidity as would clog and fetter the liberating forces released by his revelation. I need not enlarge at the present moment upon what I have stated in the past, that contributions to the local and national funds are of a purely voluntary character, that no coercion or solicitation of funds is to be tolerated in the cause, that general appeals addressed to the communities as a body should be the only form in which the financial requirements of the faith are to be met, that the financial support accorded to a very few workers in the teaching and administrative fields is of a temporary nature, that the present restrictions imposed on the publication of Baha'i literature will be definitely abolished, that the World Unity activity is being carried out as an experiment to test the efficacy of an indirect method of teaching, that the whole machinery of assemblies, of committees and conventions is to be regarded as a means and not an end in itself, that they will rise or fall according to their capacity to further the interests, to coordinate the activities, to apply the principles, to embody the ideas and execute the purpose of the Baha'i faith. Who, I may ask, when viewing the international character of the cause, is far-flung in ramifications, the increasing complexity of its affairs, the diversity of its adherents, and the state of confusion that assails on every side the infant faith of God, can for a moment question the necessity of some sort of administrative machinery that will ensure, amid the storm and stress of a struggling civilization, the unity of the faith, the preservation of its identity, and the protection of its interests? To repudiate the validity of the assemblies of the elected ministers of the faith of Bahá'u'lláh would be to reject those countless tablets of Bahá'u'lláh and Abdul-Baha, wherein they have extolled their privileges and duties, emphasized the glory of their mission, revealed the immensity of their task, and warned them of the attacks that they must needs expect from the unwisdom of their friends, as well as from the malice of their enemies. It is surely for those to whose hands so priceless a heritage has been committed to prayerfully watch lest the tools should supersede the faith itself, lest undue concern for the minute details arising from the administration of the cause obscure the vision of its promoters, lest partiality, ambition, and worldliness tend, in the course of time, to becloud the radiance, stain the purity, and impair the effectiveness of the faith of Bahá'u'lláh. Situation in Egypt. I have already referred to my previous communications of January 10, 1926, and February 12, 1927, to the perplexing yet highly significant situation that has arisen in Egypt as a result of the final judgment of the Muslim ecclesiastical court in that country pronounced against our Egyptian brethren, denouncing them as heretics, expelling them from their midst, and refusing them the application and benefits of the Muslim law. I have also acquainted you with the difficulties with which they are faced, and the plans which they have conceived in order to obtain from the Egyptian civil authorities a recognition of the independent status of their faith. It must be explained, however, that in the Muslim countries of the Near and Middle East, with the exception of Turkey, which has lately abolished all ecclesiastical courts under its rule, every recognized religious community has, in matters of personal status, such as marriage, divorce, and inheritance, its own ecclesiastical court, totally independent of the civil and criminal tribunals, there being in such instances no civil code promulgated by the government and embracing all the different religious communities. Hitherto, though regarded as a sect of Islam, the Baha'is of Egypt, who for the most part are of Muslim origin, and unable therefore to refer for purposes of marriage and divorce to the recognized religious tribunals of any other denomination, find themselves, in consequence, in a delicate and anomalous position. They have naturally resolved to refer their case to the Egyptian government, and have prepared for this purpose a petition to be addressed to the head of the Egyptian cabinet. In this document they have set forth the motives compelling them to seek recognition from their rulers, have asserted their readiness and their qualifications to exercise the functions of an independent Baha'i court, have assured them of their implicit obedience and loyalty to the state, and of their abstinence from interference in the politics of their country. They have also decided to accompany the text of their petition with a copy of the judgment of the court, with selections from Baha'i writings, and with a document that sets forth the principles of their national constitution, which, with few exceptions, is identical with the declaration and bylaws promulgated by your assembly. I have insisted that the provisions of their constitution should, in all its details, conform to the text and declaration of trust and bylaws which you have established, endeavoring thereby to preserve the uniformity which I feel is essential in all Baha'is' national constitutions. I would like, therefore, in this connection to request of you that what I have already intimated to them, that whatever amendments you may decide to introduce into the text of the Declaration of Bylaws should be duly communicated to me, that I may take the necessary steps for introduction of similar changes in the text of all other national Baha'i constitutions. It will be readily admitted that in view of the peculiar privileges granted to recognized religious communities in the Islamic countries of the Near and Middle East, the request which is to be submitted by the Baha'i Egyptian National Assembly to the government of Egypt is more substantial and far-reaching than what has already been granted by the federal authorities to your assembly. For their petition is chiefly concerned with a formal request for recognition by the highest civil authorities in Egypt of the Egyptian National Spiritual Assembly as a recognized and independent Baha'i court, free and able to execute and apply in all matters of personal status such laws and ordinances as have been promulgated by Bahá'u'lláh in the Kitab-i-Aqdas. I have asked them to approach informally the authorities concerned and to make the fullest possible inquiry as a preliminary measure to the formal presentation of their historic petition. Any assistance which your assembly, after careful deliberation, may find it advisable to offer to the valiant promoters of the faith in that land will be deeply appreciated, and will serve to confirm the solidarity that characterizes the Baha'i communities of East and West. Whatever the outcome of this mighty issue, and none can fail to appreciate the incalculable possibilities of the present situation, we can rest assured that the guiding hand that has released these forces will, in his inscrutable wisdom and by his omnipotent power, continue to shape and direct their course to the glory, the ultimate emancipation, and the unqualified recognition of his faith. Your true brother, Shoghi, Haifa, Palestine, February 27, 1929.